Anyway, tomorrow's Independent and the Telford grooming report, which makes one want to vomit as well, to be honest.
Well, yeah, it's worth just so more than this is another report about systematic child sexual abuse, CSE as it's exploitation as it's
right.
acronymized. So look, this is about grooming gangs. This is in Telford, and it happens. And you remember Rotherham and so on before. I think the really interesting thing about this is that I was looking back, and I've done this before because I once gave a lecture about this stuff. There are two types of sexual offences that are against kids. There are gang grooming in this way, which tends to be vulnerable teenage young people and children, and they tend to be passed around, and those groups of people tend to exist within a network. So typically you'll find in the Rotherham case, it was all about the nighttime economy. It was taxi drivers, late night takeaways, all that kind of stuff. There's another sect, which is known as type 2 sexual abuse, which is paedophilia, where you've got abusers who are focused on children explicitly, not the exploitation of vulnerable kids. This is type 1. And what you tend to find is that type 1, what happens in type 1 is that there are groups of socially connected men, and they have in these three cases been men of age and origin. If you look at type 2, the overwhelming range of numbers of paedophiles are white men. They tend to operate in clandestine groups out of the public view.
But we are looking at this particular story.
Absolutely.
In which they are groups, and I'm not even comfortable, to be honest, with this term Asian, which would include Chinese or Indonesia.
All right,
very specific locality that they come from.
They are, and this is, you're absolutely right. It is interesting, though, because I then looked back to see, well, what's the research on the prevalence of these kind of, what phrase should we use if we're not going to use Asian?
They were mostly
Pakistani origin.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that Nasir Afzal, who was the guy who prosecuted the case in Rotherham, he was the head of the CPS in the Northwest, you remember. There was a report they did in 2020, which Priti Patel commissioned. Oh, no, she didn't commission it, actually. It came out when she then became Home Secretary. And he said, that the report confirms that white men remain the most common offenders, but in high-profile cases, South Asian and British Pakistani men are.
So basically, you're making a plea that we don't learn anything from.
I think what this report,
because this report has made it quite clear that there was a fear of appearing racist, which was driving the failure to take action.
That is
do sound somewhat to me.
I'm absolutely not doing that. I appreciate that I might sound. I'm absolutely not doing that. These things must be investigated without fear and without any kind of side.
And I don't buy the fear story. Because when you look at how, listen, the police have no problem with us. They have no problem seeming whether or not they seem racist by obviously disproportional stop and searches and things like that. So that story just doesn't add up for you. What else doesn't add up is that this has been going on till back in the 70s. How do you have that much reporting, right? So what's either happening is that one of the things that I thought was very interesting was there was a girl who actually was impregnated by a guy that was, obviously over 18 when she was 14. How is it that he didn't get prosecuted?
And here's the thing. Contemporaneous media reports called this young girl his girlfriend and talked of a stormy relationship. Here's the thing, and I think what you're saying is really interesting, because here's the real thing, is that those gangs may be socially connected, they may be of a certain kind. The real thing is these are poor kids, and what the police are doing is refusing to believe the experience of those kids, and they are privileging the experience of adults over the kids. And I think that poverty and vulnerability, to me, is what underlies it. But I do think there is documented evidence that actually the police, or particularly counsellors actually, who were responsible for the social services departments, pulled back from for fear of being seen as racist.
And they scaled down specialist CSE teams to virtually zero to save money
sort of
as
thing.
well.
I mean, it's hideous. I
just want to know how it's possible. It just does not seem like something that could go on at that scale for that length of time. I think there's a lot more to the story, and that there needs to be some investigating from an outside department, and I don't just mean, the CSE.
But you have seen the report, and you don't buy what they have discovered anyway.
No, I do. Well, of course I buy what they discover. What I don't buy is there's more to the story. I think there's a bit of a cover-up here because, I'm sorry, when you're operating at that level, if you look at the mafia, for example, they don't get to run things the way they do if they don't have an in. I won't say too much more, but I think there's a lot more to the story.